Which one here?
Okay. Yeah, today's daf is daf nun nun aleph. I'll record from the phone. Okay, today's daf is daf nun aleph. We're going to begin by the Mishnah daf nun amid base. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah is going to, the last Mishnah we spoke about was somebody who's mekadesh two women with one pruta. So the Mishnah said over there that any mekudeshes. So our Mishnah is going to discuss also now somebody who's mekadesh two women, also not, and the din is over there in our Mishnah that any mekudeshes for another reason. Okay, so now the Mishnah says like this: HaMekadesh isha ubita. If a person is mekadesh a woman and her daughter together, or isha v'achaysik achas, or a woman and her sister in one act of Kidushin. In other words, he's saying that you are mekudeshes to me. Both of them, he says, Isha Bita, you're both Mekudeshes to me, or Isha V'achayis, you're both Mekudeshes to me. So the din is, Eini Mekudeshes, both of them are not Mekudeshes. Why are both of them not Mekudeshes? Because Kidushin is not Tefis by Erva. So since these a woman and her daughter are Erva, or Isha V'achayis are considered Erva, so the Kiddush is that Kiddush is not Tefis by any of them.
No one needs to get out.
Yeah. But the word is that even the first Kiddushin, it's not Kiddushin by anybody. Now, there was a story, there was an incident involving 5 women, and amongst those 5 women were 2 sisters. And one person gathered a basket of figs, and so this person gathered a basket of figs, and they were in their field, in the woman's field, and the Chiddush is, and the Gemara is going to focus on this, it was a shvis here. Okay, which we know, shvis, the fruit is hefker. So what did this guy do? He went into their field, took their teinim, which was hefker now, and he said, you're all mikudeshes to me with this basket. And what happened? And one of them accepted on behalf of all of them. The Chacham said, "Ein achoyes mekudeshes." The sisters are not mekudeshes. So, in other words, even though in the first clause in the Mishnah we're saying that when it comes to isha bita, isha v'achayse, any mekudeshes, here the word is that he was mekadesh 5 ladies. Amongst them was 2 sisters. So 2. Yeah. So the 2 sisters are not mekudeshes, but the other 3 are mekudeshes. Okay, so now we said that the halacha, we said that Kiddushin does not take effect if one is mekadesh these 2 women, either Isha Upita, Isha V'achaysi, B'vasachas, it doesn't work. Now, so the question is, immediately from where do we know, in other words, what's the makar midiraisa that Isha Upita, Isha V'achaysa is not mekudashes? So Amar Rami Rachama says, the Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Isha l'achaysa leitikach litzrer. The pasuk says, you shall not take a woman to her sister. That's what the pasuk says. The pasuk says, the Isha l'achaysa leitikach litzrer the galis erosa le b'chayel. So, what does that simply mean? You're not allowed to take a woman to her sister. What? Why? Leitikach litzrer, to be like a rival. Now, whenever there's two. Right. So what's the word? So basically, before sisters, 2 people, two wives are considered tzaris or rivals. So what does it say? Isha l'achayis leitikach litzrer. You're not allowed to take. One is not allowed to take a woman to her sisters to be rival to her. So now, what's the Torah saying? Hateda amna. The Torah is saying the b'shosh nasa tzaris alazari, that when he mekadesh them together so that they become not tzaris to one another. So what's the din? La yelakeichen afilu machas man. He will not be able to take to mekadesh even to one of them. So isha lachayis leitikach litzrer, that if you're going to now take a sisters to be a tzrer, so
none is
yeah. So if they become tzaris zay, so then the Kidushin is not tefes even to one of them. Okay, so now Rava said, if this pasuk is really referring to that pshat, that you're not allowed to take sisters, that is mekadesh them together, and they would become tzaris to one another, he will not be able to take one of them, even one of them. So if that's really true, Rabbi says, that's so. How do you explain that which is written at the end of the whole parsha? What does the pasuk say? What does the pasuk say? Even the nefashis that do them shall be that basically these nefashis they get chorus. So this is the whole passage of the erva, and then at the end of it says whoever does any of these nefashis gets chorus. So if you're touching up that's pshat, then if in the beginning of the parsha the Kidushin is not tafis by the two sisters, because that's what you just said, that when they become tzaris, none of them are tafis, so then koros mi mechayev. What makes him chayev to receive koros? In other words, if the Kidushin in either case doesn't take effect, so he shouldn't be chayev koros. Koros is only if he's engaged with sisters for his wife, but if Kidushin is not tafis, so they're not considered his wife. So Elamar Rava says a new pshat. Rather, Rava saying is kra b'zachar zeh. The pasuk is discussing where he's mekadosh them zachar zeh. In other words, he first was mekadosh one sister, and then he had relations, and then engaged in relations with the other. So that pasuk is telling us that so v'isha lachayis leitikal litzar, that he was mekadosh one sister, and then he had relations with another. So then he gets kodesh. Krab b'zachar. Now, umas nisan kid Rabba, and the Mishnah is to be explained like Rabba. The Amar Rabba, what did Rabba say? Kol she'enai b'zachar. Any matters that cannot be accomplished one after another. So then, I feel b'vasachas, even if a person performs it b'vasachas simultaneously, Eine also doesn't work. So, since he's unable to be mekadosh the mother and the daughter, or let's say the two sisters, b'zachar zeh, so his kedushin of them also b'vasachas also doesn't take effect. Now, the Gemara says. Okay, so now we're by Gufa, right? Gufa, it says Gufa Amar Rabba says. So we say this: Kol she'enai b'zachas, anything which cannot be chal one after another. Afil b'vasachas enai, even simultaneously, it's not chal. So now,
Kol she'enai b'zachas is not chal. The chiyuv, the chorus. So then, if it's b'vasachas, it's not chal.
Right, that's the pasuk, but that's what he's teaching us. He's telling us that if it's b'zachar zeh can't be chal, so even b'vasachas also can't be chal.
So how's shach chorus?
That's what the pasuk's telling us. The pasuk's telling us that. Oh, so therefore, that's why in this we were asking what's the makar of somebody who's mi mekadosh ishu bita simultaneously kachas. Why doesn't it work? So he learns a din that if the pasuk is telling me about b'zachar zeh, so if b'zachar zeh doesn't work, so then b'vasachas also doesn't work. So now Esvei Abaya asked Rabba a question from the following brisa. What does the brisa say? Hamarbe b'maiser, a person who increases in maiser. In other words, like this: he gave 2/10 instead of giving maiser is 10%, and he gave 2/10. He gave 20% of his maiser. So what's the din? Hamarbe b'maiser, a person gave too much maiser. He gave 20% instead of 10%. Peiresa mitukonim. So the remainder of his produce is fit. You can eat the 80% because he gave meiser properly, but the meiser are ruined because the additional meiser is not meiser, and it's also not the additional meiser is neither mu'usar, it's not, and it's also not mu'usar pairs. So since it's unclear which of the 2/10 is the actual meiser and which is not, so the entire 2/10 may be treated neither as meiser nor as mu'usar. That's the din. Amar b'meiser. So you would think, okay, the more you gave, the better. No. Amar b'meiser peiresim v'tukonim. So first of all, so the 80% the pairs is okay. However, umasreisov. But the meiser, the 20%, that's mukukolan. That's no. So frag the Gemara, but why? But according to Rabbi's opinion, why is this produce? Why is the 80% fit to eat? We should say, let us say that kol she'ena b'zeh achar zeh, that any matters that cannot be accomplished zeh achar zeh, so afilu b'vas achas also cannot be accomplished even if one performs them b'vas achas simultaneously. So since one cannot designate a meiser of these 2/10, so the chayda 1/10 followed by a second tenth, he should also it shouldn't work at all. So it should be considered as though he had not designated any meiser at all, and his produce should not be considered as muser. In other words, if b'zeh achar zeh doesn't work, so b'vas achas shouldn't work. So why is this peiros considered a good peiros?
What's the problem here? What's the issue here? He gave more.
Right.
So what? How much I don't understand. So why didn't he cover the? Why didn't he cover?
Because you don't know which one is meiser, which one is of that 10th. Which one is meiser?
So if he put 1 of 5, so he definitely covers himself. I don't understand what's wrong with meiser. He's giving more meiser. So what's the problem? The lady is getting more than he deserves.
So Rashi says, "Amar b'meisers hifish echad mechamisha shmena arba l'chulim b'tzad zeh u'mad l'chamisha l'meiser." Masreisa mekukolim. Why? The tevel u'meiser mu'uravin zeh b'zeh. Why? Shakri kulei tevel. Heaven. U'kishmena arba l'chulim lo yahaya l'litol menakri l'meiser. Elachatzi mida chamishis u'hifish mida shlema. Shemeiser l'chololav ela k'vi cheshben. So what's the question? The problem is on the 20%. The problem is on the you took off 10. So when you take off 10, it's very clear that this 10 is meiser. But when you take off 20, so you don't know which pile is meiser, which is not.
For sure 10 is meiser.
So you're saying let the entire 20 be meiser,
yeah,
and the 80%. So apparently,
I'm not sure I understand.
So
he's going to leave. He's not giving it to anybody else. Who's giving it to? He gives it to meiser. He's giving meiser.
But he made a mistake. He didn't. I guess he didn't want to give it. Meaning, if he was mevatel, maybe in a chalami. The word is.
A person is giving more.
You're right.
1/5. I'm trying to read this understand about giving 1/5. It's a great mensch.
Right.
The lady is getting too much. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, fine. So Amalei, Rabbi says to him, Shani Meiser is different, the Isa Chatzoim, as the status takes effect partially, unless then it could take effect as on half. The Omar, as one said, Tikdeish Palga Dechitza, let half of each grain of wheat be designated as Meiser, he has designated. In other words, just as one could designate entire grain of wheat as meiser, you also can designate half of a grain. So in this case too, when one is meiser, one takes off 2/10 of the produce. So we don't say that 1/10 is the actual meiser and the other 10th is not meiser. Instead, half of each grain of the designated portion is meiser, but the other half of each grain is not. So accordingly, the remainder of the produce is meiser, as 1/10 of the total has been designated as the first half. The portion designated as the meiser is run, because it's impossible to identify which part of each grain is designated. So he's saying not that let's say you took off 20 and then 10 is meiser. Each kernel, that half, exactly.
So that's why it's not shaykh.
That's why it's not shaykh, yeah. Okay, so now the Gemara now raises a shaila on Rabbo. But in Meiser Behema, but isn't the case of Meiser Behema? No, what's the case of Meiser Behema? So every few times a year, you have to take, let's say, from your behemoths, and every 10 you have to mark it down and say this is, you have to bring it to the base of English. Now, but in Meiser Behema, but in the case of a Meiser Behema, the Lechatzayin, which does not take effect partially, you can't be makdish half of an animal for Meiser. And there's no possibility to separate animals as one who designated one animal as animal meiser cannot designate another animal for the same purpose. Now, so what's the problem? Rava says if two animals emerged, let's say from that pen, and the guy said both as a 10th, and he called them both the 10th. Now the 10th and the 11th animals are now murav. Now, so what happened? One is makdish with the kedusha animal, while the other remains. So that becomes now meiser. The other animal becomes a oila. But there's no way to determine which one. So the question is, if you're saying that or you're saying that things that cannot be accomplished zachazek can also not be accomplished, even if a person does a bavas achas. So the chayeda, neither animal is hektish. Because one cannot designate both the 10th and the 11th animals as meiser, one after the other. So the chayda, what do we see? So if you're saying that, so the chayda, if zachar zed doesn't work, so then the chayda b'vasacha shouldn't work. And we see over here that the city is meiser, and the other one is Ayla. So my answer is this: the meiser behema is different. The isib b'tas, as two animals can be designated as meiser one after another in the case of a mistake. In other words, even though we say that a person cannot designate the 10th and the 11th animals as meiser, if he did so mistake, so then the din is that they're both hektish. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Kadal Chi Asiri. If a person called the 9th animal the 10th, and then again made a mistake and called the 10th animal the 9th, and the 11th animal the 10th, all three animals are hektish. Now, why? So the first is hektish because it was designated as the 10th. The second, because it actually is the 10th. And the third, because it was designated as the 10th. So what do we see from here? That more than one animal can be hektish as meiser, if it was done b'tos. Now, in Rava's example, he was makdish, the two animals. I guess both animals move together. They move mamash out together. Yeah. So they were both. They emerged together and were together designated as the. So now the Gemara asks another shaila on Rabba's klal. Hare teda, but there's a case of the 40 chalas. So we know by a teda you have to bring 40 chalas that accompany a korban teda, Thanksgiving korban. The lesser b'tosh, which are not hektish if they were designated in b'tos. V'leisa nami b'zachazah, and also it's not hektish if two sets of loaves were designated at the same for the same korban zachazah. Also doesn't work. V'itmar, and what does it say? Toida shenishcheta al shmeinim chalis. If you have a korban teda that was shechted and it had 80 chalos, in other words, twice the required amount. So Chizkiah says, Kotshila arboim mitech shmeinim. So Chizkiah says 40 day loaves are hektish, even though you don't know whether you can't identify which one is what. Rabbi Yechon says like Kotshila arboim mitech shmeinim, and Rabbi Yechon says that not even 40 of the 80 loaves are hektish. So the Cheda, they disagree with regards to whether or not hektish that cannot take effect b'zachazeh can take effect b'vasachas. Because we know again. What's the question? We know by the korban teda, which is there's no tois and there's no zachazeh. And what is the we have a machlekes over here that if it designated 80 chalas, twice the amount that they have to, so
40 become
so Chizkiah says that 40 is hektish. Why? Because the chayda b'zachazeh does work, and the Rabbi says that it doesn't work. So the chayda machlekes amirim. So the Gemara says lavit marlo. It wasn't stated with regards to this machlekes. Amr Yishum Levi says hakol meitim palhechad amar. That Sai, Chizkiah, and Rabbi both agree that anywhere that one bringing the korban ela said kol shila arboim mitech shmeinim, that let the 40 or the 80 loaves be hektish, so then lo yikdushu arboim elim kein kachi shmein. So then like this, kachi lo arboim shmeinim kachi. Lo yikdushu arboim elim kein kachi shmeinim lo kachi. So they both agree that when a person brings a carbon taida and he says, let 40 of the 80 loaves be hektish, so the 40 are hektish, and in case where he said 40 loaves should not be hektish unless all 80 are hektish, so then everyone agrees that they are not hektish. Now, so they disagree only with regards to that case for one bringing a carbon taida designates 80 loaves, but he didn't say anything without specification of how many loaves he wants hektish. He brought all 80 of them. So Chizkiah holds that even though he designated 80 chalas, he wants to be matish only 40. And when he sets aside 80 loaves, he only intends to ensure that he will have 40. So he brought the extra chalas so that if the first 40 loaves are lost or became, let's say, tamei, so the second 40 loaves will be the backup exactly. Mar Savar. So therefore the first 40 loaves are hektish because he didn't say anything, and the other 40s bring as a chayis. Mar Savar, and Rabbi Yechon holds that the carbon gadol kamekaven, he tends to bring a large carbon of 80 chalas, and therefore none of the chalas are hektish.
Get all 80 and that's to have 80.
Right. So what do we see? Yeshua and Levi's the way he explains the machlekes, this is like the Rabbah said. So Fred the Gemara, now the Gemara asks on Rabbah's opinion, and why does Rabbah explain the Mishnah according to the opinion of Rabbah? Let him say that we have a halacha that Kidushin that's not given for Bia, it's not a Kidushin. And in all these cases, in other words, any Kidushin that is usher for the couple to have relations is not a Kidushin. So the since both women would be usher to the man if they were Mekadosh to him, as each would be a relative of the other one, so the Kidushin should not take effect. So why not just say that all these cases doesn't work? It's because Kidushin Shemisr in the Bia. So the Gemara says that Rabbah could have explained the Mishnah in this way, but the Dvar of the Rami Bar Chama, he stated his explanation according to the opinion of Rami Bar Chama. In other words, Rabbah should be understood like this: your opinion that the halacha of the Mishnah is learned from a pasuk is not correct, as the pasuk is referring only to the one who's mekadosh two sisters, and the mother and the daughter, b'zachar zeh. But you should explain the Mishnah as referring to the person who's mekadosh them at the same time. But the reason being that anything that can't be b'zachar zeh also cannot be accomplished even if a person performs it b'vasachas. So in other words, he's not explaining his opinion. He's just explaining based on the way Rami Bar Chama explained it. Okay, so now Itmar, we learned the machlekes amarim azeh. Kidushin shem yisur lebia. If you have kidushin that's not given for bia, you can't. The bia is not shaykh. So Abaya says have a kidushin. Abaya says it's kidushin since the isser against. So basically, just because it can't be misur in the bia doesn't make that the kidushin is not a good kidushin. So Abaya and Rabba says lev kidushin. No, Rabba says it's not kidushin. It's nothing, right? Now, Amar Rabba says, Barahina Asberli. Rabba says that Barahina explained to me this halacha, and he says, Kiga Isho Bala. The Pasuk says, when a man takes a woman and has relations with her, which means Kidushin HaMasur in the Bia, have a Kidushin. Kidushin that's given the Bia, so Kika Isho Bala has to be Kidushin HaMasur in the Bia, have a Kidushin. Kidushin Shemisur in the Bia, when it's Kidushin, which is not given over for, it cannot be consummated by Bia, then have a Kidushin, it's not considered Kidushin. Okay, so now we learned in the Mishnah. Amekadish Isho Bito, Isho V'achese Ka'achas. If one who is Mekadosh, a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister in Ka'achas, so then it's Eini Mekudeshes. She's not Mekudeshes. So now the Gemara says, Ha'achas Isho Bito Isho V'achese Mekudeshes. Now, if he said he's being Mekadosh only one of the pair, in other words, let's say the woman or her daughter, or one of the pair, the woman or her sister, without specifying which one of them. What is that? Mekadosh Ishu Bito, or Isha V'achese Ke'achas Enim Kudashes. Which is Mashma Ha'achas, L'cheda, Ha'achas Mi'isha Ubito. If he said that he's Mekadosh only one of this, the woman or her daughter, or the woman or her sister, without specifying which one she's Mekudeshes. Now, l'chera, even though it works, but l'chera, in practice, it's also for him to have relations with either of them, as it cannot be determined which woman he was Mekadesh and which woman is the relative of the Mekudeshes. So, why does the Kidushin take effect? L'chera, to you, Kidushin shemisron lebiyanino. These are acts of Kidushin which is not given for Bia, and should not work according to
What's the reason why he can't have a relation? Because he doesn't know which one he's Mekadesh. I'm not sure which one he said, or one of you. What is the issue here? Because you don't know which one he's Mekadesh.
He doesn't know if he was Mekadesh
He doesn't know which one he's Mekadesh. He can't live with them.
He doesn't know if he's Mekadesh the mother or the daughter?
That's why.
Right.
To be sagt in my Chal Kidushin. It's Chal Kidushin. It's not Chal Kidushin. What's the word? In other words, it means that it's not Kidushin. Why? It's called because it's not just in other words, it means he doesn't know who is Mekadesh.
Right.
So obviously he can't live with them. So it's the same idea.
So the question says, what do we see from here? So it must be tzituf to the Rava that we see that we don't hold to this Kidushin Shem Sur Labia. So Rava says, one second, look at the Sefer. We brought that, in other words, if you're saying that Kidushin Shem Sur Labia is still considered a good Kidushin, look at the Sefer of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if you have a case involving 5 women, and amongst them were 2 sisters, what did the guy say? Which is mashma choyes udeni mekudoshes. It's mashma the sisters are not mekudoshes. Ha nochris, but this is mashma that it's the sisters are not mekudoshes, but the unrelated woman, the other 3 women who are not related lecheda, are mekudoshes.
And he still doesn't know, and he doesn't know who he's mekadesh anyway. So it's the same idea. Why there you say it's mekudesh? He doesn't know. It's a suffix.
Why is it suffix? He said. We said that what's the problem? We're saying that the girls are not, the sisters are not mekudoshes. The other 3 are. So now we have to explain what Rava could have said. Now, so now the Gemara says, "Hey chidami." Okay, we're still in the middle.
Okay.
Now, now the Gemara continues. Hey chidami. What are the circumstances? If we say that he said, "You are mekudeshes to me," then kni at v'chamarhu. So this is comparable to the one who gives something to another and says that you and the donkey acquire this item. V'at v'chamar leikona. And in such a matzah where someone would say that you and the donkey acquire, so then he didn't acquire the item. Since the donkey cannot acquire items, the person does not acquire it either, because the owner basically linked the 2 kinyonim. So here too, since he tried to give the kalkula of the Kidushin to all the women, so, which some of them are sisters, he cannot be mekadesh together. So the Kidushin should not take effect, even with the other women, despite the fact that they are suitable for him. It's like saying, Kini at v'chamarhu. I want you and the donkey to acquire. So just like since you're putting them in the same, basically, putting them in the same sentence. So if the chamar is not suitable to be kaina, so you also not suitable to be kaina. So the chayda, by saying harikulchem mekudashos bekalkal azay, so the 2 sisters are like the donkeys. Right. So the chayda shouldn't work. Elalav the amar lahu, but rather, what are we referring to? We're referring to the amar lahu atem mikem. Achas mikem. Referring to a case where he said to them, one of you is mekudeshes and uktani. And it teaches us that Enacha is Mekudeshes. The sisters are not Mekudeshes. Why? Because with regard to the sisters, the Kidushin Chedes, it's a Kidushin Shemesh in Labia. So the Gemara says, L'Rava Kasher Eisha. So the first case in the Mishnah is difficult to Rava. And Abaya kasha seifa. And the last poses the question of Abaya. So the Gemara says Abaya mataras tamei and Rava mataras tamei. Both are going to explain azay. Abaya mataras tamei. Abaya is going to explain according to his reasoning, and he says like this: Makadosh isha ubita, a person who's makadosh a woman and her daughter, or isha v'achesik achas, or a woman and her sister. One, any mekudashes are not mekudashes. Now, ha'achas m'isha ubita, but if he's mekadosh one,
it says one of them.
If he's mekadosh one of a pair consisting of a woman and her daughter, or m'isha v'achesei, or a woman and her daughter, so mekudashes. So if he says in the case of one who's mekadosh a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister, so in one act of Kidushin, so neither of them is mekudashes. But if he's mekadosh one of a pair consisting of a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister, by saying that one of you is mekadosh to me, so each of them is mekudesh as a matter of suffix and requires a get, despite the fact that the Kidushin is ein mesur lebiyah. Because maybe he is mekudesh to the other person. Now,
what's the, again? The second is what he says. So achas b'isha bita. In other words, he says one of you. So both of them need a get.
So yeah, because it's a suffix. If it's a suffix b'chlal, which one he meant?
Okay.
So if he says mekadosh ishu bita ishu v'achesei, but if he says that if he's mekadosh one of the pair, one of the ishu bita ishu v'achesei, then the mekudeshes. Now he continues. Now v'im amar, Abaya says, v'im amar, and if he says clearly, the one who's fit for bia shall be mekudeshes to me, so then any mekudeshes, neither of them is mekudeshes, because he cannot have relations, not knowing which one of them is mekudesh and which one is the relatives. And there's also a mice involving 5 women. And amongst 2 sisters, when he says, that the one amongst you is fit for beer with me, shall be mekudeshes. So the Chacham say, no, ein achayis mekudeshes. The sisters are not mekudeshes. Rava mataras tamei, and Rava is going to say azay. Mekadosh achas m'isha ubitoy, achas m'isha v'achisa. In the case of a person who's mekadosh one of a pair consisting of a woman and her daughter, or one of a pair consisting of a woman and her sister, it becomes as one who simultaneously is mekadosh a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister, and they're not mekudeshes. Why? Since the Kidushin is in Libya. And also there was a story involving 5 women and amongst 2 sisters. And one of them gathered, and the man gathered a basket of figs and said, all of you and one of the 2 sisters are being mekadosh to me with this basket. And the Chacham said, the sisters are not mekudeshes. Now, since the Mishnah can be read in either of these 2 ways, so basically you can't bring up a raya about anything about Kidushin, about Kiddushi, Shemisrun the beer, in Misrun the beer, because you could touch up either like the way Rava touches up, or the way Abaya touches up, or the way Rava touches up. Okay, Toshma, so now come and bring a raya from the Mishnah. In the case, the Mishnah says a person who's Mekadesh's daughter to a man without specification, without specifying which daughter he meant. He's Mekadesh, he's a bunch of daughters, and he's Mekadesh's daughter to a man. So the halacha is, Ein habeges bechlal. The grown women are not included amongst those who might be Mekadesh's. Why? Because the father doesn't have the right to be Mekadesh his begeres. So the Gemara says, Haktanis bechlal. Now, we can be mashma from here that Ketanis daughters are included, and each is Mekadesh as a matter of suffix. Why? Kidushin Shem Misrun Nebiyah Nino Lecheda. This is it's Kidushin Shem Misrun Nebiyah. So therefore, so Elamai must be Tiyufta de Rava. So therefore, according to Rava, Lecheda, this is a Tiyufta, because we see that we don't care about Kidushin Shem Misrun Nebiyah. We see that they're all included. So Rava says no. What are we doing? So there's one adult and one minor daughter. So once the adult daughter is basically removed from this consideration, it's clear that the father was mekadosh the ktana, and the kiddushin is given. So then So why is that? Then
why is it not Mr. Nabia?
why is it Mr. Nabia? Ketana.
This is the Ketana.
No, but how does this answer it? So now, if there's only one Gedela and one Ketana, so now the Gedela is out of the picture. So the Ketana. So now we know for sure that the father was Makadesh Dafka, the minor daughter. Because I guess it's clear. He knows clearly that it's about the Ketana. Okay, so now the Gemara asks how big is Ketani, but the Cheder of the Mishnah says clearly, it says clearly grown woman, Lashon Rabim. So the Gemara says Beger's the Alma. What does it mean, grown woman? My Beger's. What does it mean, Beger's? Beger's the Alma, grown woman in general. In other words, whenever people are Mekadesh the daughters without specification, only the Ketana daughters, not the adult daughters, are included. So the Gemara says, if so, if so, that there are only two daughters, what's the purpose of this halacha? What's the chiddush? Obviously. So the Gemara says, and what are we dealing with over here? The Shavis Shliach, where his adult daughter designated him as her Shliach to be Mekadesh her. So you would say that when he accepts Kidushin from someone on behalf of his daughter without specifying, he accepts it with her in mind, and he intended to be Mekadesh her rather than the Ketana. Therefore, it teaches us that a person does not set aside something from which he has benefit, the Kidushin of his Ketana, where he keeps the Kidushin money, in favor of something which has no benefit, the Kidushin of his adult daughter, where she keeps the money. So we don't say that. So the Gemara says, aren't we dealing with a case where the adult daughter said to him, when you take Kiddushin, the Kiddushin money is for you. So he also has Bahana from it. The Gemara says, even so, the father would not have Kavanah to be Mekadesh his adult daughter. Why? Because the Shavik Inish mitzvah that a person does not set aside a mitzvah that is upon him to Mekadesh his Ketana and perform the mitzvah that is not incumbent on him, the Kiddushin of his adult daughters. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Toshma. Come and hear a raya from the Mishnah. Person who has two groups of daughters from two women. In other words, he has multiple daughters from his first wife, and after his first wife died, he remarried and had multiple daughters from his second wife. So what happened? And he says, he has daughters from his first wife, he has daughters from his second wife. And he said, I was Mekadesh my elder daughters to somebody, and I don't know if it was the eldest of the older group of daughters or the eldest of the younger group of daughters. Or, let's see, so basically, he doesn't know.
Could be the youngest from the first wife or whatever, who was older.
The eldest of the daughters, the eldest of the younger daughters, or it was the youngest of the older group, which is nevertheless older than the eldest of the group. So the halacha is, Kul and Asuris, they're all going to be usher for marrying someone else without first getting a get. Chutz Mektana Shebekadnes, except for the youngest of the younger group, which is for sure not Mekudeshes. These are the words of the mayor. The Kidushin, this Kidushin is in Mr. Labia. Why? Since each daughter could be the sister of the actual Mekudeshes. Yet the Kidushin is considered valid. Or otherwise, they would all be permitted to marry without using a get. The fact that they need a get, it must be that Kidushin Shem Mr. Labia works.
What's the issue here?
You don't know. You don't.
Who's he giving the Kidushin to?
He was Mekabel Kiddushin, the father.
Father is Mekabel Kiddushin.
But he doesn't know.
He's the Shliach. He's not for himself. He's Shliach.
But who was he Mekabel for?
You don't know for who. So each one is, don't know for who
I was Mekadesh, but I don't know which of the daughters I was Mekadesh.
So the youngest from all of them is Zicher off the hook. So her we definitely didn't mean her. And everybody else is a shy. The youngest and the oldest who was youngest.
What do we see from there? We see that we don't reckon with Kidushin Shemisyon Labia. So the Gemara answers and says, "What are you doing with over here?"
In fact, you need a get. That means that
we don't care about the Kidushin Shemisyon because
exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Right. So what are you doing with over here? A situation where they were first identified, and then they mixed up. In other words, the Mishnah is not dealing with one who was Mekadesh daughter without specifying which one. He stated which daughter he intended to be Mekadesh, but then he forgot. So the actual Kiddushin, when he accepted, is Take Misur Labia. So the daughters are Mekudeshes al Safik.
Right.
So the Gemara says, Dekanami, what does any did? It doesn't say any do. It's not known. He had forgotten. He forgot. Says, I don't know. The first person that he didn't know, but he forgot. So the Chalais Kiddushin still is Chal. But over them, and doesn't say it's not known. So let's learn from the language of the Mishnah that we're dealing with a case where the daughters were Uruv after they were identified. No? So what's the Chiddush? My answer is the Hafukim Midrav Yesi. He says a person does not place himself in uncertainty. And when he said the older daughter, he must have meant the older daughter of the older groups, which is, in other words, the eldest of the eldest. So that's what their basis is. Therefore, the Meir teaches us that a person does place himself in sveikas, and the suffix applies to each of his daughters, except for the youngest of the youngest group. Okay, do one more. Tashma, come and bring a eye from the Mishnah Yevamos. Misha Kiddush Achas Mishtei Achois, any idea is a Kiddush. Person was Mekadesh, one of the two sisters, and he doesn't know which one he was Mekadesh. So Nason get Lazeh, he has to give a get to both of them. Al Tzveikas. And this Kiddushin is the Cheda, is for sure not Misur Labia. So why do both need a get? So the answer is they identified and then later became. In other words, the actual Kiddushin was given the Bia. So the sisters are Mekudesh out Suffolk. So the Gemara says they cannot be done any day. Right, same thing. Like done any yadua. Remember what's the Chiddush? So the Gemara says Seifa is Tzichalei. It's necessary for the later case in the Mishnah. Meis v'loi och echad. If the man died and he had one brother, so the din is and the brother performs chalitza with both of the sisters, but he cannot perform yibum with either of them because one of them is the sister of his yivama, who's forbidden with rabbanim. If he had two brothers, so then echad chalitz v'echad miyabim. If there's two brothers, one of them performs chalitza with one of the sisters, but may not take it as yibum, due to the possibility that the sister is the sister of a woman with whom he had yibum. Echad chalitz v'echad miyabim. And then one takes one does chalitza, one does yibum. Now, so if both brothers marry the sisters before going to Beis Din, the Beis Din does not remove them from their marriage, and they're permitted to remain married, even though the first couple should have performed chalitza. The Beis Din doesn't force them to divorce. Now, what's the chiddush? It says dafke michlatz v'hada yibumi. Dafke specifically if one brother first performs chalitza and afterwards the second brother performs yibum. Aval yibumi v'hada michlitz. But if one first performs yibum and then chalitza, then loy, the other brother, then the yibum will not take effect. Why? Because the kapoga b'achis kukasi, as he's possibly encountering the sister of the woman bound to him by yibum. Until the yavama is basically released through chalitza, her sister is considered, to a certain extent, is the sister of his wife. So the one who performs yibum might have chosen the sister of the woman to be mekadesh by the dead brother. So, okay, let's stop here.